come here. I will let Mr. Pankaj introduce his speakers. Thank you very much.
Good morning, sisters and brothers from the cashew industry. I'm very happy to be here to moderate this session on cashew kernels. And before we start, I would like to invite the panelists. And I will start by seniority, seniority in the cashew industry and seniority in the age also. So first of all, Jim Fitzpatrick. Yeah, you are the father of the cashew.
I'm the old guy, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. After me.
After you.
Over the last 1.5 days, we have been talking about what is happening in the producing countries in terms of production trends, in terms of technology change, in terms of processing in Africa, etc. So now today, in the next hour or so, we will try and get some insight into what is happening in the most important part of the value chain, the consumer side. So I mean, that's all. The producing country, the processing countries are all working towards supplying the end product to the consumer. So what's happening there is very important for all of us to know. And we have a very distinguished panel here who will take us through what are the latest trends in the various markets that they are covering. Before I hand over to the panelists, I would just like to share a slide the first slide here which shows you the global cashew kernel consumption. These are all rough figures, not accurate figures, just a ballpark figures to give you an idea of the state of the market. We have a total world cashew consumption of about 875,000 metric tons of kernels, which is the second biggest after almonds. The value is approximately $7 billion. At current prices, it was probably higher in 2018. And if you take the geographical distribution, India takes about 1/3 of the world consumption. And then we have USA, which takes about 20%, 19-20%. Same with Europe. And then we have China, which takes about 9 or 10%. West Asia, which takes about, again, 9-10%. So these 5 countries, the top 5 consuming areas, consume almost 80-85% of the world production. And we are fortunate that we have people here who will be talking about a major portion of those 5 markets. Next slide, please. And then we come to the global cashew kernel trade. I mean, I'm taking out India because India consumes what it produces. So we have a global cashew kernel trade of about 600,000 tons, out of which 75% is from Vietnam. And then you have about 12.5% from India, 4% from Brazil, 8% from Africa. Africa and Indonesia as well. I forgot to mention that. Africa and Indonesia, about 50,000 tons. That 50,000 tons seems on the lower side because the Burma kernels which have gone to Vietnam are counted as Vietnam exports. So that you please take that into account. So having given you an overview of what the world market situation is, I will now hand over to Jim to make his presentation on what he has to say.
So I'm going to talk to you about the UK market. Now you might be struck with a certain irony, an Indian asking an Irishman to talk about the UK market. If you know your history, you'll see the irony in that. Can we have the slides, please? Okay, so where are we talking about? We're talking about the UK, a small island on the western fringe of Europe. Why are we talking about the UK? Well, we're talking about it separately because as of the 31st of January, the UK left the European Union. So in the past we would group them together, but now it's not part of the single market and it will be treated separately. This may have some far-reaching consequences in time to come. What's happened now in terms of trade and business is just the start. There'll be at least a year of trade negotiations, and in the end, this may have far-reaching consequences for those of us who do business in the UK. And we need to bear this in mind as we look forward. So we might find that by the end of next year, standards may change, styles of business may change, even import tariffs may change. And we need to bear this in mind as we look at the UK market for the future. A little bit about the country, 64 million people. The UK is the second largest economy in Europe, fifth largest economy in the world. It's a modern, diverse economy, 80% based on services. So it's entirely different to the UK we would have talked about 30 or 40 years ago, which was a manufacturing economy. Let's look at the UK imports of cashew kernels. So this chart shows the total imports, and there you can see quite a positive trend since 2010. And you can see that it largely belongs to Vietnamese suppliers, like just about everywhere else today. From Africa, very little, but increasing slowly. And there is, of course, a number of imports from other parts of Europe. And this is important because this is the part of business that might come into play if the trading relationship between the EU and the UK changes. So we see Vietnamese imports growing rapidly, much faster than the market itself is growing. The UK market is growing at about 5% every year, but the Vietnamese share is growing at 10%. And what appears like good news for Africa, 8.42% growth, isn't really that good news when you consider the low level of supply from African countries, which we look at again in a minute. You might notice that we've got a decline in imports in 2018, all to do with price. But we shouldn't be too distressed by that, because after the last big rally back in 2010-11, we saw exactly the same thing, which was followed by 5 years of growth. Why did we get growth? Very simple. Price stability. When we talk about these kinds of sophisticated markets, we're not too concerned about the base level of price. What we don't like is price volatility. $4.50 one year, $3 the next year. This is not good news for business. Let's look at where the UK buys its cashews and compare that to the European Union. So as you can see, Vietnam has the lion's share, just like everywhere else. Much the same as the EU, but the UK is less likely to buy cashews from India and less likely to buy cashews from African countries too. And you'll notice again about 3,000 tons of 22,000 coming from other European countries. And maybe that's an area that African processors could consider targeting in the coming years, depending on the outcome of the Brexit negotiations. So a little bit about the character of the market. So it's got a highly developed snack food market, mainly based on WW320s. You've got strong brands. You've got private label, which is very important in the UK. And you've got a lot of innovation in flavors and textures. UK is particularly notable for different flavors, different kinds of products being launched. I want to look at one particular segment of the UK market, and this is innovations and new applications. We're going ahead of ourselves. So it's, in the UK market, you will see a lot of new products. Things like snack bars, breakfast bars, using cashews as an ingredient, using cashews with other products to create texture, to create flavor, to build innovative products. What's interesting and a little bit distressing is that in the UK, a lot of the buyers who buy and make these products, they buy 320s. And they have them diced and sliced. Why? Because they don't trust the food safety characteristics on the brokens that they're supplied, mainly from Vietnam. So think about that from the UK market point of view. We have a company who's prepared to pay $3.50 a pound instead of $1.50 a pound for roughly the same thing because they're scared of the food safety risk. This is a very interesting point about the UK market, and it's a very interesting opportunity. If you can supply products that meet the spec, fulfill the food safety characteristics, that's where you can sell brokens. Now, you're not going to sell 20,000 tons of brokens. But the market could take 1,500, 2,000 tons of brokens, which in the current environment is significant. And they would be value-added products. So if someone buys a 320 and dices it, that costs them £400 a ton. If they then take the diced and roast it, it costs them another £200 a ton. And they've paid $350 for it instead of $150. There's plenty of food for thought in there. The big consumer trends in the UK, similar to most of Europe, but they're very suitable for cashews. We talk about protein, free from certain ingredients, natural products, convenience, breakfast bars, snack bars, breakfast cereals, mixed own flavors, sweet and savory. So we have there cashews and cranberry, for example. And this is becoming more and more a trend in the UK and indeed elsewhere. And of course, as everywhere else, natural, healthy, low-fat products. We need to look at the players in the UK market. Number one rule in the UK is the supermarkets rule. The supermarkets determine the characteristics of the market and the way it operates. There are major brands in place. Many of them also do private label as well as their own brand. And then there's this sector, which I've called young innovators. This is the kind of diversity of products we've seen. It's new applications. It's a different way to look at nuts and nut snacks. We've got a lot of importers in the UK, so if you look at that market, expect strong competition. Expect price competition in the snack sector, maybe a little bit less so in the ingredients sector. And of course, they have their fair share of brokers. So you have a traditional nut importing sector married together with a very young, innovative, new product application sector. And in there's an opportunity, to my mind, for African processors who are, one, food safe, certified, we're probably talking BRC, and two, have the ability to communicate and market in a sophisticated, diverse economy. So if you're talking about the UK market, you need to talk about process and you need to talk about communication before you even attempt to enter that market. So in summary, we have a large country now separated as an economy. We have a very positive trend in consumption. We have a diversity of products, and we have a relatively crowded market. It's not easy, but there's lots of opportunity in it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim, for a very insightful presentation on the trends in the developing trends in the usage of cashews, and you have actually answered a couple of questions that I had prepared for the. Uh, Thank you. So now I will request Wim to tell us what's happening in EU.
Okay, thank you, Pankaj, and it's a privilege to tell you what is happening in the European market, and that is continental Europe. Although the figures are still EU 28, which includes the Brexiteers. So I will tell you some figures and also some focal areas that we as manufacturers really hear almost weekly from our customers, which are mainly European supermarkets and the big food industry. So I will take you through notes on food safety, social compliance, and transparency. So here, I think it is parallel to Jim's figures. We see a tremendous growth the last 10 years. It almost doubled from 76,000 tons up to 140,000 tons. The last is an estimation because the December figures are not yet in, but we feel it will land on this figure. And for this, you know, I put the Champions League Cup to it because it's really tremendous. But there's a watch out. And the watch out is that the share of cashew, the volume share of cashew in the total nut sales in Europe is decreasing. It is decreasing fast. You know, when we see figures like this as a food industry, we are really very scared. So we come from 2 years ago 9.6%, and it's slightly 8% now. That is also linked to price because you can remember. I think everybody can remember the big price increases we faced in those times. Cashews fit in today's modern diet, as also pointed out earlier. It's really loved as a snack. It's a privileged snack, but also fits today in the eating patterns, where especially a trend amongst millennials and the new consumers go for non-animal proteins. So it's really a product for the future in our ID. This is some slides from Nielsen. And you can see this is an overview of the total food categories. And cashew is in the confectionery and snacks. And that happened to be together with another category, the biggest growing category in the total food area. And so we are in a good place. Then some focus areas. And one of the real big focus area is food safety. And I printed some screens from The Guardian on a recall, and also from a Dutch newspaper, the Volkskrant. And The Guardian says, okay, we have a recall for Heinz baby foods, but they found metals, you know, and that links to also what we as importers of cashew, we frequently find. We installed a laser in our factory, you know, just to test on all the impurities and the non-intrinsic products that we get in. So cashew is really our most polluted raw material that we buy. From the Dutch newspaper, it says, okay, the most recalls are about food safety. You know, so consumers nowadays are less tolerant. And whereas maybe 20 years ago, if a person found a little stick in a product, they kick it out like that with a fingertip. And now they claim, they shame, they put it on social media, and they ask for indemnification of any bills from dentists, etc. And so please be aware. For this, we as company, we require that all our suppliers have a GFSI, that is Global Food Safety Initiative recognized scheme. You know, that is, for example, BRC IFS. So really, this is a must, and this is also a cry or a shout out for you, also as kernel processors, really get certified. And certification is not the paper at the wall. Certification is a mindset. And food certification is a practice. Because then you make a difference. And then this business can grow. Again, what Jim was saying, we see now a big differential between the wholes and the splits and the pieces and so. And I know that people in Europe make a living out of cleaning cashew. So really that needs to have attention from all of us. Second focal point from the communities in Europe is social compliance. And I always say just Google Guardian and cashew and you will see the not so nice part of our great industry. That is, the hands. And it's mainly about working conditions in the factories. And it's also about livelihood of farmers, that get unfair pricing. So I have mainly, or 2 points there, and that is one is a threat, a reputation risk for our business, of course on the left side, so it needs to be addressed by all of us. And at the right side, you see Tony Chocolonely. Well, they don't do cashew, or maybe not so much many cashews, but this company became the biggest chocolate brand in the Netherlands with a sustainability agenda. Because they claimed, okay, we have slave-free chocolate. And their growth figures are really impressive. Last year, plus 27%. So really that's, they look now for partners because they can't finance their growth anymore, and they will also go international. So please, this, don't, let us not stick, in the old image of cashew, but let's move on, and let's make the threat an opportunity. Last point on this slide is an assessment done by the Ethical Trade Initiative Norway. This is a non-governmental organization that fights for standards, the ETI standards. And what they did with a kind of boots on the ground approach, they went to Vietnam and they assessed practices in the industry. And they made a nice report of that. And you know who sent us these reports nowadays? We get it back from our retail customers. And so retailers know what's going on. Retailers know about forced labor, and retailers also know about outsourcing process steps of your cashew processing. And they know the difference between single roof processing and the packaging center. So this is only a matter of time that we all need to open up on this. The next, and we need to be a bit afraid of that, can be naming and shaming by the ETI. Like, for example, Oxfam Novib is doing with supermarkets. And so don't let that happen and really move on. Oops. Last topic is about transparency. And we came from far. I joined this business in '95, where the nut value chains were completely intransparent, at least for myself. More intransparent than what I was used in my previous area in the vegetables. But this is now also quickly changing. And this slide is about lighthouse projects from 3 Dutch retailers. It is Albert Heijn, the biggest, Jumbo, number 2, and Co-op. And what they do, they have these pilot projects with blockchain. And blockchain is opening up the complete supply chain. And in some cases, you can even send a little tip, a little pocket money to a grower or to a grower cooperative, because all the steps in the value chain, all the transactions are recorded and are traceable. And so on the photo on top you see this is an orange juice project that they do with Louis Dreyfus, Albert Heijn, and Co-op is doing that with nutmeg. And there are also smallholder farmers at the beginning of the value chain. And so don't tell ourselves we are different. No, we are not different. You know, there needs to be a will, a political and a business will to do these things. On the right side, it is, they say, ontdek de reis van onze tilapia. It is, see the trip of our tilapia fish. And that is from Jumbo. Oh, sorry. So, in conclusion, I think that I can say that cashew is really a loved product, and there is an absolute bright future for cashews in Europe. It's a big market for kernels. It will remain a big market for kernels, but we need really to watch out for our reputation. And that is the reputation on social compliance, the reputation on food safety. And this is my presentation, so if you have questions.
We'll take the questions later on, Wim. Thank you, Wim. Very, very interesting. You have pointed out the growth in the consumption. You have talked about the amber lights that we have to look out for. What we need to do to make the amber light turn into green. So, I mean, we will probably have more discussion on that in the question and answer session. I will now request Tejas to talk about the West Asian market.
Good morning to all. Can I have slides, please? It's mainly about the cashew kernel market in the Middle East. Middle East is a kind of a group of countries starting from Bahrain till Yemen, and the main market which is there is Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia and Turkey. United Arab Emirates is also a big market for the cashew kernel, but sure. Sorry. Major market for the cashew kernel in Middle East is Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, mainly the Dubai, where country self-consumption is very less, but caters the neighboring countries' requirement for, it's mainly a trading hub. These are the few facts about Middle East market. Total market size is approximately 55,000 metric ton. Buying pattern is quite unpredictable and season-based. When there is a large amount of tourism or during the Hajj time or a Eid holidays, the demand goes up very drastically. One of the fact that as of now, Middle East is not very strict in terms of a certification requirement like BRC, traceability and corporate service responsibilities. One of the different features of Middle East market is that they prefer the tin packing as compared to the flexi pouch vacuum pack. Middle East, because of the lots of Arabic population there, they prefer the large size nut starting from W160, W180, 210, 240, 320, and also the Scotch grids are widely preferred for the roasting industry. As of now, Middle East has been buying lots of cargo from the Indian processed, and they really pays a premium for that. The new trend, growth in consumption seen due to the population growth and increase in floating population due to tourism. Over the last 2 years, the things have been quite changing that Middle East is now focusing buying pattern. They are more preferring to buy cargo from Vietnam as well as little bit cargo from the Africa as well. The main reason is the difference in the price. Again, it's like the things are changing. Middle East has also started to accept the cargo in the pouch packing. That's one of the good things from where Africa can also export the cargo to the Middle East. Lots of new consumer brands are coming up there, and now as other developed countries like USA, Europe, they are also now focusing on the various certification. This is way to come forward. And now in this year, 2020, Expo is going to be happen. Lots of new companies may come up there, start up their units, and maybe Middle East can also be a hub for packing and processing there in the future for the cashew nuts. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tejas. Great insights on what's happening in Middle East. Now, we are very unfortunate that we are going to miss a presentation by a dear friend of mine, Kalbavi, Prakash Rao, on a very important market, on the biggest market in the world, India. Because of travel issues, he could not come, but he has authorized Srivatsava to talk a little bit about what he had prepared.
Chairman sir, thank you very much for this opportunity. I am nobody compared to Mr. Kalbawal Prakash Rao. I'll try to do some justice to. This is better? Yeah, thanks. Indian markets, this is a historical perspective. This is very important. What was India about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, especially on cashews? From the 80% export-oriented commodity, today it is 85% domestically consumed commodity. What has led to this transformation? It's a great Indian cashew bazaar story. This is the estimation from Kalbavi cashews. Earlier we saw Mr. Pankaj Sampat's estimation. This is slightly different from that. Currently, India is estimated to consume about 340,000 tons with a share of about 40%. What is driving this is the GDP growth. As India has moved it has crossed, it's the 5th largest economy in the world. So purchasing power, market proximity, most important market segmentation, shifts in eating habits, and how do we service the market? These are the things which is driving the change. Many of this would be very relevant as Africa aspires to become processors. In terms of supply, India will process about 2 million tons. There's roughly about 440,000 tons of kernel equivalent. Raw seed production has expanded from 5 states to 14 states, so as the manufacturing base from 5 states to almost 20 states. Practically no state is left in India where processing in some form or other is happening. Average size of the unit is also changing from an average of 3 metric tons to today we are talking about 10 minimum. Mostly they are above that. New projects are all around 20, 40, like that. 60% mechanized, 10% automation, 30% is still manual, mainly on the finishing side, because most of this unit cater to the domestic market where the finishing is most critical. In terms of geographical distribution, southern production, northern consumption used to be the traditional thing, but that's getting disrupted majorly. Hub and spoke system is a new thing. This is very interesting. I need to spend some time on this. The way India has developed its market, the way the rest of the world has developed the market. Snacking is about 100,000 tons. We see the range of segments. Gifting, mainly it's the wholes. But if you look at most of the other segments, so in India, sometimes some of the factories, like, there are doyens here, 30 to 40 grades they take because that is a kind of level of sophistication and segmentation they have developed over a period of time. The main drivers of Indian growth is the enormous ingenuity of the processors to make cashew as a part of daily routine. And there is a shift in communication from cashew for the entire family. That's a new communication. And each of the association in India, they have done tremendous promotions in, making the story of cashew known, not only to the next level, which is the wholesalers, but of late, even to the end consumers. There are several brands like Britannia biscuits and so on, which have also tremendously helped in this entire campaign. But see the depth and diversity of the Indian markets. So this is what Mr. Jim alluded to earlier. How do we creatively put pieces and brokens into use? Here is a classic case, how India has done it, and it's very much possible as Africa aspires to become a major processor, this should be an integral component of that particular strategy. These are the variety of applications. And this is a good work, and most of it, thanks to INC, GCC, they're pumping in so much of money to get these things validated. What was traditionally known has been getting validated scientifically, and that is increasing the acceptance of cashew in wider markets. Okay. This is back. What is the future? How it looks like? By 2022, 20 million tons of processing, 460,000 tons of equivalent of kernels, domestic markets around 350,000, and there is a very strong belief India will come back into the export market, and India will remain not only the most viable processing origin, but also more balanced, because when you look at how the value chain is being serviced, the farmers get paid one of the highest, if not the highest, in India. So it's a much more balanced value chain in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vatsa. I think Prakash will be happy that you have done justice to the presentation that you made. Now, we have time for some questions. So before I throw open the house questions to the house, I would like to go back to this brokens thing, because today what we are seeing is that the small market for brokens is affecting the processors in several ways. Number one, his parity calculations for holes. Number two, his liquidity, because if he has to stock the pieces for a long time, he is not able to turn over the money quick enough. Now, from the figures that Prakash just presented, the Indian market is probably only 40% holes. I didn't take the exact figures, but 40% holes, 60% is brokens. And I know that in the US, in the EU, there are new products being introduced like the bars, the paste, the butter. But is there something that we as an industry can do to I don't know what to say, to innovate in a structured manner and offer it to the food manufacturers to then if you give them a ready-made thing that, yeah, this is the way you can use cashew pieces. Is there something that we as an industry can do? I would appreciate your thoughts. Yeah.
Well, from my point of view, I think that we need to do a number of things. The first thing is we need to change the way we think. So I'll give you an example. Yesterday we were talking about the crop. There's a good crop predicted all around the world, but it's regarded as bad news. Is this the only commodity where a good crop is bad news? We need to change the way we think about things. People who buy ingredients want products that are ready to go into their process. So they need to be food safe, they need to be packed in bulk, they need to be specified to what they need. Unless we can do that, I don't think we have much chance to increase the usage of brokens in manufacturing. So we need to change the way we think about food safety. As Vin said, it's not a piece of paper on the wall. It's the whole way we do business. Absolutely. So we have a choice. We could consider that we accept low prices for brokens forever. Try and get higher prices for wholes and keep beating the farmer lower and lower and lower. Eventually production will fail. Or we could decide that we're not actually running a casino, we're running an industry. To do that, we need to think about process, we need to think about product, we need to think about certification. That's a long process. And an advantage in Africa is that many processes are at the beginning. They can build this in from the very beginning, if they choose to do so. And that might help them with their brokens in the long run. But this is not a problem that will be solved overnight. It's not a problem that will be solved by a shortage and, $4.50 for 320s. That will only make the problem worse. So the first thing we need to do is change the way we think.
I can give an example from the almond industry in the States. The acreage of almonds is increasing, and hence also production increased over the past 20 years in almonds. But prices didn't fall, because the almond industry market their product very right. And this is first for snacks and then for meal components. And now also almonds it can be found in many other innovative foods, like almond milk. And so I think that as a line extension, you can also launch cashew milk. But prime is food safety. That needs really to be addressed. Price stability. A boom and bust scenario will not, drive R&D managers from the big Nestle's, Unilevers, to work with cashew, for example, because the price is now very attractive, but when they really have their business plan and their state gates ready, the price is up and their business plan is not working anymore. So also price stability will help in that sense.
I would like to take off from that. By the way, Wim, cashew milk is already in the market in the US and in India. Europe is lagging behind, so do something about that. No, my next question.
Pankaj, I was responsible also for sales, and I bought 320s for a German chocolate manufacturer, and we had to granulate the WW320.
Right, no, I know.
The
industry needs to improve the food safety. I agree.
And also, don't underestimate that traditionally Europe is a market of hazelnuts and almonds in confectionery. But okay, and people know it, and so it is a matter of time, and I'm positive there.
Good. Okay, so now I come to the question, to the point that you made last, the stability of price. All commodities have fluctuations, but the wild fluctuations that we see in the cashew industry, like what Jim said, like it's almost like playing in a casino. How can that be avoided? Because almonds, you have crops going up and down depending on weather, but you are able to have some sort of price stability which induces people to use more cashews. Is there something that all of us can think about and try to avoid the extreme volatility? Anybody from the house wants to make a comment? Yeah, you want to? Yeah.
See, everyone talks about the price of the raw cashew nut, prices of the kernel. But if you see in today's time, majority of the markets, which is like either USA or Europe, we can't call it, it's a kind of a speculation. I will call it as a well played game. You know, like they keep themselves away for buying for a certain long period of a time, and market goes down, then suddenly all cargo get covered, price gets stable, then again the mode of a silence comes in the market. So is it like as a rocket shot supplier, as a processor, as a buyer, if all works at the same kind of a mindset to make this industry sustainable, then I don't think so this price volatility, and it will not be a speculative market.
Cashew is the most complex supply chain that we have in our product portfolio. But I am a strong believer in shortening the supply chain. And so I think with larger partners, and then especially farmer groups, farmer cooperatives, that have also capabilities of talking directly to processors, will contribute to that. And that is not for 100%, but if that say has a capture rate of 40-50%, that will have a stabilizing factor as well.
True, very true, very true. Anything you want to add, Jim?
I would just say that, the way academics like to talk about value chains, it seems to me that we don't. What we actually have is two value chains. Yeah. One for RCN and one for kernels. And there's a big problem because these diverge. And this, you always hear this word, there's no parity, whatever that means. But what it really means is we don't have an integrated value chain. And without an integrated value chain, there is built-in volatility. So we don't have an integrated value chain. We don't have accurate information. We don't have honest discussions about information. We have too much propaganda. Right. And until we cure those kinds of things, it's going to be very difficult to remove the extreme volatility. Volatility, 20 cents, 30 cents, this doesn't bother anyone. Yeah. When it goes up by 40% in a year, when your container goes from $90,000 to $160,000 cost in a year, right, and when your supplier decides he can't ship it anymore for that reason, this is not a modern value chain. This is not a way to do business.
Thank you, Jim. Now, we have very experienced people on the dais, so I would urge the audience to make use of the opportunity to, yeah, please. A mic there, please.
Hi, Vignesh. My question is to anyone on the dais over here. So now that the whole debunking part, cashews are really healthy for the human body, my question is, how is that going to be communicated to the consumers? For example, the California Almond Board does a really good job every time they have a big breakthrough to be communicated in different continents, countries, translated to the local language and even to the style of the local community. So my question over here is, who is going to communicate, or who does the responsibility fall on over here? Because if it has to organically pass through information from person to person, it's going to take too long, where not any of us are going to see the direct benefit of this newly proved information. So that is pretty much my question.
And I would just make a small remark that the INC and the Global Cashew Council are doing something about it, but I would like to hear what Wim and Jim had to say about what the processing industry and the retail industry in Europe and USA could do. Because the Indians know what it's healthy and they are consuming everything. So what are you doing in the EU and the US?
The Almond Board of California is an extremely rich agency, and so they collect money from each pound, that is being exported or shipped, domestically and export. And so that enables that board to do global promotion. And I think that everybody in the room has a responsibility also to spread the word. There is no pen or a global organization for marketing of cashews. What Pankaj was saying, there is the Global Cashew Council as a body of the INC, and that funded this research that lead to these new insights. And so, but within INC will publish that on their websites, but don't expect commercials and pages in the media. I think that is also up to us as roaster and as channel, to inform our customers. And what we, for example, did and frequently are doing is we ask for space in in-house magazines. And these in-house magazines are very popular in Europe, and they can be found after the cash register, and they are free for consumers. And so I have been involved in pages on Indian cashew, and the last one was, I think, 2 years ago, when we went with a trip from a major retailer in Europe. We went to Ghana, and there was a 5-page editorial on cashew, including also all the goodies that cashew include.
I suppose I think it's a really great question, and I just pick up on one thing. The idea of spreading the news by word of mouth is not what it was. If you said to me, we spread the message word of mouth 20 years ago, I'd say, forget about it. But if you say it today, we're all connected.
Social media. Yeah.
We need to use social media. We all have access to it. And within that, there are opportunities for a new kind of word of mouth. And it's not something that we should underestimate. I don't think cashews can compete with the Almond Board of California, because we have diverse origins, we've many different qualities, many different interests. They have 80% of the world's almonds from one state in one country. So we need to look at it differently. A good starting point would be, let's look at social media. Let's all take responsibility to promote cashew nuts, and then see if we can come together to design a promotion to young people on social media.
Tejas, you wanted to say something?
Just a different perspective. As Africa, we ourselves is not consuming lots of cashew nut. So like when, yes, Western countries, developed countries, India is consuming a lot cashew nut. If Africa itself, like when we grow the cashew nut, we know the benefit. So if we make more attempt to initiate the consumption at the origin level itself, then definitely, like if a little bit more increase in the consumption at origin itself will promote the cashew consumption at a very high level.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. A mic, please. Mic there.
Hi, good morning. I'm Arvind. As Mr. GM already presented that most of the industry in UK or Europe, they are taking WW320 and they are slicing and dicing there, right? Because they do not have trust to get that quality. So what I'm trying to say, definitely there would be a way to earn those trust in which environment they are making there. So what especially African processor need to do to reach at that level to earn those respect, so that they can directly sell those pieces or those sliced dice pieces from here. So this is what will happen. Processing cost will go at the downside. Even this will bring the benefit at the level of consumer also, because after taking WW320, slicing, dicing, adding extra cost, so anyhow this cost is going to add on the consumer. So by putting some extra efforts, by doing some visits from those good processors who are taking W320, slicing, dicing, then they are making final product. If they take a visit to our factories and give some guidelines how to do to reach at their level, I think it will make a sense for us.
Basically, he's asking how can the origin processor gain the trust of the food manufacturer?
Well, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So it's about, especially about controlling, what I said, foreign bodies, impurities. I think that is one of the bigger risks nowadays. Also, cashews are much more consumed natural, so also really control microbiological contamination. I think that these are the major food safety risks that we hear. So it's and there's a development process, you know, but the rules of the game are really very strict. Indeed, if you want to deliver to us, so that is really get a GFSI certification, you know, get a BRC, and get the focus from the people, especially at the line, on food safety. You know, that needs to be really living in a processing plant. The example that I gave from our German chocolate client, it's only one. But we see improvement. You know, there are splits and large and small pieces being imported into Europe, but it's really an attention point.
Anything else, Jim?
I suppose on this point that what I would say to processors is to start talking to their customers. It's, you know, we are talking about a small segment that buys 320s and dices them and slices them. But there's a much bigger potential market for broken cashews. So we need to focus on building trust with buyers. So first start of that is talk to the buyers, find out what they want, meet their food safety, ask them if they want it diced or sliced, if they want a product that's uniform, how do they want it packed, and consider that in business planning. The idea that you can, you know what they say, you build and they will come, it doesn't actually happen that way at all. Talk to them first, see what they want, and build according to what they need.
Very true. Anything else? Yeah, at the end, there, the right-hand side, there.
Hi. Jim was saying that good crop is a bad news. The mentality has to change. Talking on the same point, kernels have moved from 4.5, 4.8 to 3.07, 3.1. The shelf prices have not changed accordingly in Western markets. So the consumption growth, there were promotions, yeah, there was consumption growth which has happened, but it would have been much different. The consumption probably would have surpassed what it was, and it would have led to kind of stability in RCN prices today, which is looking very threatening for a West African farmer at these current prices. Your view, please?
I think you have to bear in mind when you talk about changing consumption that it takes time. So price changes in the market are not passed on immediately, and there's a lot of logic behind that. This business is done very far forward. Companies are very reluctant to change their pricing because of the trends that they've seen. I mean, would you want to short the market at $3.05 on 320s right now for 2 years forward? You wouldn't. Why would you expect a manufacturer or a supermarket to do that? So we cannot expect them to adjust prices in the way commodity prices adjust. This takes time. What they want in order to boost demand is not lower prices. What they want is stability of prices. If you said to a manufacturer that the price for the next 2 years will be, pick a number, 375 for 320s, they'd plan on that basis. But if you say to them, well, it might be 275, and it might be 575, and it might be somewhere in between, depending on where we feel on the day, he goes, no, I'm not doing anything with this. Come back to me when you have a plan. Come back to me when you have stability. Come back to me when you have an industry. That's the key message on why consumption doesn't immediately react to low prices.
Yeah, we have seen that in previous situations where prices decreased, but general retail business was still concluded for that running year on the price basis August, September, October the year before. You know, so prices were based long term. So also when I was visiting Vietnam at that time, the people say, hey, what's happening in Europe? You know, consumption is not increasing. But guess what? You know, the price, the retail price, was still based on the old price, of the 520 and so.
Right. So stability is the key. I mean, stability with a manageable fluctuation is the key. I mean, how the industry is going to do that? Big question mark. Anyway, any more questions?
Yeah, if second year of bearish market and the RCN prices continue to be low, do you see a possibility of West African governments coming together with 2 million tons, imposing something like living income differentials like it has happened in cocoa?
No.
What's your Malik? What's your view on that? Malik, what is your view on that? Will Ivory Coast do something like that?
Ivory Coast has already done that. I mean, it's just about other governments to follow and come together.
Right.
2 million tons is a big amount of quantity to rule the market, or just to change the behavior of the market.
Right. Okay. Anything else? Fine. So let's end the session. Thank you very much, everybody. Jim, Wim, and Tejas. We had an excellent session. Thank you.
Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for the moderator and his panelists. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, mesdames et messieurs. Ainsi s'achève le deuxième panel de cette journée. Je vais donc inviter le modérateur du panel, Monsieur Pankaj Sampat, à remettre les mementos en guise de remerciement et d'honneur à ses panélistes. Et le premier qui reçoit donc Monsieur Wim Schipper, de Intersnack Procurement BV. Le deuxième est à l'endroit de Monsieur Tej Hasmod de ETG. Et le troisième à Monsieur James Fitzpatrick de Ingredient Sourcing Solutions. Et mesdames et messieurs, que vos ovations les accompagnent, s'il vous plaît. Est-ce qu'on peut leur faire des ovations? Round of applause for them, please. Thank you. And I would like to invite Mr. Konate Issa, Vice President. Stay there, please. Stay on the stage. I would like to invite Mr. Konate Issa, Vice President of the IECCI, the Association of Exporters in Côte d'Ivoire, to give the memento of the moderator. Une brillante exposition, un brillant panel auquel nous avons assisté, mesdames et messieurs. La photo de groupe photo, please. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, so end the second session of today. We will have the break.